Hi everybody, welcome to my newest video. Thank you for clicking on it. I hope you all are well. Today I am going to start another new series on my channel. This one is going to be called Storytime. It has come to my attention that we are allowed to read books and things like that on our channels, which I never knew that we were allowed to. So now that I know that we are allowed to, I am going to go ahead and start doing that. That is something that I have wanted to do for quite some time, but I wasn't, I was always under the impression that due to copyright issues or whatever, we weren't allowed to, but it has come to my attention that we can. So now this is something that I can bring to my channel. I'm going to start out with short stories here and there. I don't think that I am going to read anything of significant length. It's more along the lines of short stories, things like that. Unless I come across a book that is not humongous, that I think would be a fun book to read on here. Each video, the intent is to be inclusive in and of itself. I really don't want to do videos that are going to be multiple videos on the same book. So, with all that being said, it's time for story time. The book that we are going to read from today is Crime Stories, 20 Thriller Tales by J.A. Is it Konrath? If I say the name inappropriate, I am super sorry. I believe it is from J.A. Konrath. I am not going to read all of these stories. I'm just going to read a few. Okay, The Big Guys. I'm surprised you asked me here, Ralph. I didn't think you liked me. Ralph grinned over the wheel. Don't be silly, Jim. He cut the engines and glanced over the starboard bow. There was some chop to the sea, but the yacht had a deep keel and weathered it well. Well, we've been neighbors for almost 10 years, and we haven't ever done anything together. Ralph shrugged. I work crazy hours, not a lot of free time, but I've always considered you a good friend, Jim. Plus, our wives are close. I thought this would give us a chance to get to know each other. Belinda mentioned you like to fish. Jim nodded. Mostly freshwater. I haven't done much deep sea fishing. What are we going for anyway? Ralph adjusted his captain's cap. I was originally thinking salmon or sailfish, but it's been a while since I went for the big guys. Big guys? Sharks, Jim. You up for it? Sure, just tell me what I need to do. First step is getting into the harness. Ralph picked up a large life vest, crisscrossed with straps and latches. This clips onto the rod, so you don't lose it, and this end is attached to the boat, in case you get pulled overboard. Jim raised an eyebrow. Has that ever happened? Not yet, but it pays to be careful. These are great white waters, and some of those bad boys go over 2,000 pounds. Ralph helped Jim into the vest, snugging it into place. What next? We have to make chum slick. I've heard of that. Fish blood and guts, right? Yep, it's a shark magnet. You want to get started while I prepare the tackle? Sure. Ralph went to the cooler and took out the plastic bucket of chum. Even refrigerated, it stank to high heaven. He handed it to Jim with a ladle. Toss that shit out there. Don't be stingy with it. Jim began to slop chum into the blue waters. Ralph swiveled his head around, scanning the horizon. No other boats. So, Jim asked, what's the bait? Ralph gave Jim a deep poke in the shoulder with a fillet knife, then shoved his neighbor overboard. Jim surfaced, screaming. Ralph ladled on some guts. Not very neighborly of you, Jim. Screw my wife while I was at work. Ralph, please! Jim's hands tried to find purchase on the sides of the yacht, but they were slippery with blood. Ralph dumped more onto his head, making Jim gag. Keep struggling, Ralph smiled. The big guys love a moving target. Don't do this, Ralph. Please, I'm begging you. You better beg fast. I see that we already have some company. Jim stared across the water. The dorsal fin approached at a brisk pace. Please, Ralph, you said you consider me a good friend. Sorry, wrong choice of words. I actually meant to say, I consider you a good chum. It took a while for Ralph to stop laughing. That's funny. Sick, but funny. Okay, let's find another one here. I'll read one more. That was funny. Oh, goodness sakes. All right, let's find one. Lying eyes. Billionaire David Morgan didn't look anything like he did on television. His distinguished face appeared worn and tired, and his piercing blue eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep. I just want her to be okay, he said, for the 100th time. Detective Starker patted his shoulder. I know, Mr. Morgan. The kidnapper said he'll call with your wife's location. Morgan's eyes released another tear. Are you sure they have the money? He asked. We're sure. Starker thought back to the money drop, and his insides burned. $1 million in unmarked bills left in a suitcase in a parked car. The kidnapper had warned the police that any attempts to stop him or track him would result in the death of Celia Morgan, David's young wife. Nonetheless, Starker had made sure there was a tiny transmitter in the suitcase, housed in the lining and impossible to detect. But at the money drop, Starker had watched the kidnapper transfer the cash into a large plastic bag, leaving the suitcase and the tracking device behind in the parking garage, leaving the authorities with no way to find him. Now Celia's only hope was that the kidnapper was a man of his word and would reveal her location. What if he doesn't call? Morgan asked, voice trembling. When Margaret, my first wife, passed away, I never thought I'd love again. I couldn't bear... His words were lost to another crying spell. Starker gave the millionaire another pat on the back. Don't worry, Mr. Morgan. We'll get her. Let's go over your list of enemies again. Enemies? I told you before, I'm the CEO of one of the largest manufacturing companies on the planet. I've been in this business for 40 years. I have more enemies than there are names in the Manhattan phone book. Does anyone stand out? Someone who felt you wronged them? Someone wanting money from you? You saw the list. Everyone on it hates me. I told you before, Detective, that line of investigation is hopeless. How about around your home? Fired any of the help lately? Landscapers, maids, chauffeurs? Celia handles all that. Wait, I did have to fire the pool cleaner a month ago. I came home from work early and found him in our living room, watching television. Fired him on the spot. What was his name? I don't remember. Celia'll know. Oh dear. The mention of his wife's name brought fresh tears. Starker felt awful for the man. Where did you meet Celia, Mr. Morgan? She was one of my house cleaners. I pretty much ignored her for the first few weeks she worked for me, but she always had a kind word, a bright thing to say. Soon I began to linger before going to the office, chatting with her over morning coffee. I know she's barely a third of my age, but she makes me feel young. The phone rang, startling Stalker. He nodded at Morgan to pick it up. Hello? Is she okay? Where is she? Starker, listening in on the extension, wrote down the address for the storage facility where the kidnapper claimed he'd left Celia Morgan. Let's move, Starker told his people. Super Value Storage was across town, but Starker arrived in record time. He led his team and the anxious David Morgan to Storage Locker 116. It was a large-sized unit used for storing furniture, and the door had a combination lock on it. One of the cops used the bolt cutters, and Starker raised the door, a chemical stinging his eyes and making him squint. He shone his flashlight inside, revealing a terrified-looking Celia Morgan. She sat in the dark, tied to an office chair, a gag in her pretty mouth. Behind her were 2 empty buckets of something called sodium bisulfate and a large empty cardboard box that had bromine written on the side. David Morgan rushed to his wife, granules crunching under his feet. "Mr. Morgan," Starker shouted, "don't touch anything until we've collected evidence." Starker stepped in, snapping on a pair of latex gloves, removing the gag from Celia's perfectly made-up face. She was a strong one. Her mascara hadn't even run. He then used the utility knife to cut the clothesline that securely bound her, careful to leave the knots for the crime lab to analyze. "Celia, my love!" David Morgan embraced his wife, and she kissed his cheek. "I'm okay, David. He didn't hurt me." Starker motioned for his team to come in, and he reached overhead and fumbled with the bare bulb hanging overhead, burning his fingers before eventually finding the pull cord and bathing the area in light. "Did you have a chance to see your kidnapper?" Starker asked the woman. "No, I'm sorry. I never saw his face," she said, her clear blue eyes drilling into him. "I've been sitting here in the dark for hours." "Hours?" Starker repeated. "Yes." Starker gave Morgan a final pat on the back and then separated the married couple. "I'm sorry, Mr. Morgan, but I'm going to have to arrest your wife as an accomplice in her own kidnapping." Okay, I have to read this in part here. It says, how did Starker know that Celia was an accomplice in her own kidnapping? It says here, Celia's makeup was perfect. If she'd been in that room for hours, locked up with chemicals that made Starker's eyes sting, her own eyes would have been red. She would have been crying. Plus, when Starker reached up to turn on the light, the bulb was hot, meaning it had recently been on. Thus, Celia had just gotten there and was lying to them. Since bromine and sodium bisulfate are pool cleaning chemicals, Starker suspected Celia was in on the scheme with the pool cleaner Morgan had fired a month previously. That was cool. You know what? I said I'm not going to do 2 of these, but I think I will. I think I'll read 2 more in the next video. So keep your eyes out for that, okay? With that being said, I hope you all have a great morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever and wherever you are listening to this. I hope you enjoy this new series, and thank you all for your support. Love and hugs. Bye, guys.